time in the field, you're able to analyze, like, where's that wind coming from? Where's it going? When's it switching? And then you can make a game plan. And this calf started like, meow, meow, meow. And I called to it back. And it literally ran up and like wanted in my backpack. Enjoying the ride is 95 to 99% of the battle. My truck breaks down and I'm 60 miles from town. Long story short, it blows up and I'm truckless. The thing about goals though is, like, if you hit all of them, like, you're probably not setting good enough goals. And that's one of the things I think I realized about the whole season in general is, like, you got to put a lot of faith in the process. This is Jaden Bales, and you're listening to the Wild Initiative.
Put down your latte and pull on your boots.
Our culture needs people that are leaders and not people that are waiting for somebody else to show them how to do it.
Those fields of tofu, that was formerly habitat for wildlife. You're killing off wildlife by being a vegetarian just as much as a hunter when he kills a deer.
I'm like, well, you see that bush right there? There's your bathroom.
Yeah. My dad wears a Levi jacket. He sits in front of a sagebrush, and he tells me the best camo is hold still.
Not to Donnie Vincent this, but be relentless in everything you do. Don't crap out, go back to the truck with excuses or whatever.
Okay, assume I get a deer. How do I cut it up to fit into a Honda Civic?
Just get outside and go, because once you do, it's all gravy from there.
Hey, this is Zach Griffith.
This is Hannah Barron.
This is Jason Phelps of Phelps Game Calls.
Hey guys, this is Cody Rich from the Rich Outdoors podcast.
What's up guys, this is Chad Mendez.
You're listening to The Wild Initiative.
Hey y'all, welcome to episode 127 of The Wild Initiative. Before we get started, I want to say a big thank you to Sawyer Products for their continued support of the podcast. Y'all make sure you head on over to Sawyer.com. Check out the absolute best when it comes to water filtration, insect repellent, sunscreen, and first aid. They've been doing this for a long, long time, folks. Their products are absolutely bulletproof, and I use them on effectively every single one of my hunts. So make sure to go grab that essential gear that will keep you in the outdoors for longer. So, y'all, today on the podcast, I am here with Jaden Bales. I met Jaden through Mr. Cody Rich, who y'all have heard from on the podcast before. Jaden works with Cody, helps him out a lot on the Rich Outdoors and Backcountry Fuel Box, and really glad to have him on. Jaden, thanks for joining me.
Yeah, Sam, thanks for having me on, man. Appreciate it.
So just to get started, why don't you give the listeners kind of an intro just about yourself and how you were really originally introduced to the outdoors, how you got into all of this.
Yeah, you bet. So I grew up on a family farm in Northeast Oregon. Kind of as a result of that rural life, I've kind of always been in the outdoors. You know, both my grandparents all hunted, and my dad taught me how to hunt from a pretty dang early age. I'm pretty sure he put me in a backpack when we were turkey hunting to kind of get me started. So I've been in the outdoors a lot. And now I'm kind of working in the outdoor industry here. With, like you said, Cody Rich of the Rich Outdoors podcast and Backcountry Fuel Box. I kind of, after college, did that whole thing where you're trying to figure out, where it might be best for you to land. And then I realized corporate life probably wasn't the life for me. So I realized, decided to maybe take a little foray into the outdoor space and hit up Cody and when he launched Backcountry Fuel Box. And that kind of brings me here.
So, I mean, since we're talking about it, what all do you do kind of with Cody on Backcountry Fuel Box?
Yeah, so my role with Backcountry Fuel is kind of as like the operations dude. I do a lot of marketing and product acquisition. So we put all of the products and I find them and put them in the box, like weird stuff from crickets to the normal like kind of mountain house and Clif Bar type things. And it's really fun, actually. I've gotten really deep down that rabbit hole, both from a nutrition and a performance perspective, as well as like just trying to find new kind of weird, quirky stuff. So it's pretty sweet. If anyone did want to check it out, we're running a sweet holiday sale right now. So if you head over to Backcountry Fuel Box, you can check that out.
Awesome. Well, head on over to Backcountry Fuel Box, check that out. But so you recently, Cody had shot over some stuff to me not too long ago about he kind of put together an elk 201 course.
Yep.
And, I was reviewing that, and you actually kind of went through that, and you really got to put that to use this year, didn't you?
Oh yeah. So how the 201 elk hunting course came about was like, I was working remotely for Cody at the time, and I'd get on the phone with him to talk about work related stuff. And somehow we'd end up both looking at Onyx, trying to run through hunt plans for this fall. And I was like, Cody, I'm trying to, my goal was 2019 was the year of the elk. I was going to get my first elk with bow. And then Cody and I would have 1 and 2 and 3 hour long conversations about what that actually looked like and how that would come to fruition. And then we worked together to build this kind of 201 level hunter podcast. And then we did like a little email mini course on it, trying to like organize our thoughts in a way, or his thoughts in a way that would be easily digestible for folks. And as a result, I implemented kind of that 201 process this year. And not to give away the spoiler, got an elk. So it was a long road to hoe though. I mean, like I said, I grew up hunting. I've been around elk, I've been around deer, and I've been outdoors my whole life, but it took me 5 years. I just wrote it down, 5 years of hunting elk, over 500 boot miles, countless gas, tanks, and then 5 misses to actually arrow an elk. So it felt like a long time coming, and kind of implementing some of this stuff is really what I think resulted in a full freezer, which was also just a huge relief. As I'm sure I've heard your podcast before, it's coming for you, man.
It's, like you said, that whole process really speaks to me because, it's been year after year, and trying to get into elk, trying to figure this thing out. And, this is my third elk season. And, I look back and I see huge improvements. The first year was a disaster to the point of almost being a joke. And then, last year was, I was out with a buddy, and it was just, we just had no luck. We saw some elk. We weren't able to get into anything. We were just in a bad spot. And then this year I was a little worried. I started out and I just wasn't seeing stuff. I actually, Cody was kind enough to send me a couple tips on some spots, and Ryan Lampers gave me some tips. Brian Barney gave me some tips. So I'm thinking, like, between the three of these guys, if I can't find some damn elk, I'm hopeless. But then this year I finally started getting into them, and you see that growth each year.
Yeah.
And it's a huge process, and it's always frustrating when you're not filling tags, but it's so important to look at that though, and recognize your growth each year. And while you may not be filling tags, you're definitely having a very successful year regardless.
Oh man. And I think, I put a lot of pressure on myself this year, just because I was, saying this is the year of the elk and it's got to happen. But in all honesty, like, any day spent out in the woods chasing elk during September is a good day. Like, and I wouldn't rather be anywhere else, so whether or not you fill a tag or you've gone for a bow hike, like, man, I think that and just being present in that moment and that process of getting there is so important. I think a lot of folks like miss out on that.
Yeah. And I definitely did quite a bit of bow hiking this season. And then I kind of finally found my spot. I'm hunting in Montana, and I don't exactly get out there all the time to scout,
Right.
And so, people talk about that, if you're not able to get out to scout earlier in the year, you're going to spend your first week or two of hunting scouting, you're going to, or I'd say like the first, third to half of your time out in the woods scouting. And for me, that, that was a couple of weeks for sure. And, but once I finally started getting into elk, you can start making those mistakes. You can start actually having those exciting moments. But, so tell me a little bit about your hunt, man, and some of the stuff you kind of learned that you feel was like critical to your success.
Yeah, you bet. So to first preface all of this like season, I think it's really important to note that I lived about 45 minutes to an hour from the mountains where I ended up shooting my elk. I think that gives a person an extreme advantage, because I was out there I worked it out with my boss. He's kind of into this stuff, and was able to take Wednesdays, either Wednesday mornings or Wednesday evenings, and scout. It was Wednesdays from June up until hunting season. So when you've put that much time in the woods prior to even stepping into that area, where elk are going to be, because you figured out where they like to feed, where they like to bed, like where the populations of elk live in this mountain range. And for someone who maybe doesn't live exactly where there's a bunch of elk, what that would look like is just, being in the same hunting unit, same couple units, same couple mountain ranges, year in and year out, trying to figure that part out. It's just kind of all that process. So I'd put in prior to this season, I'd put in, 2 seasons worth of days in the woods, just because I lived so dang close. And really that made a huge difference, and like you're saying, you're on season 3. Have you been in different spots each year?
And yeah, see, that's the huge thing. I've kind of especially realized this, or I should say, I've always known it, but it really hit home this year, the benefits of hunting the same area year after year, even week after week, because you learn that, the shortcuts, how to get around, where the elk generally are going to be, where they like to feed. And it was amazing. It's one of those things you hear all the time, but until you really experience it and can see the benefits of it, it really doesn't hit home for you,
Oh, exactly. Well, and so a good example of that is I had this one glassing spot. It was actually in the Alpine. It was above 11,000 feet, where I could get up on some big, rocky knobs and glass kind of into some basins. And so when I was doing that, thinking about timing of the elk season itself, I was able to identify okay, these are the basins where elk are consistently coming up and feeding in the morning, or feeding at night, and then coming back down into the timber in the morning, in the morning, then bedding in the timber. So once I'd kind of had that pattern figured out, I was able to go in there and actually come in through the bottom, which it was 3 miles either direction. Whether you came in from the top or the bottom, you had to go 3 miles to where these elk were feeding. And I was able to kind of put together a game plan based on where that consistent wind was, from being up there multiple mornings and nights in the summer, and then also know what kind of pinch points those elk use and what little gullies and basins they were in consistently. So, when you're looking at going back to that same area that you were in maybe this year, I bet you exactly kind of those travel corridors and those paths where those elk are going to be, and then you're kind of able to make adjustments based on what you're finding. Because the funny thing about that was, so I either went super high to scout or I went super low to scout. So I was either at the top of the mountain or I was on the border of private. And on the border of private, you're able to glass into some of those hay meadows and some of those fields and see where elk are using that vegetation and then going back upwards. It's kind of the reverse. But then again, you're able to, with that time in the field, you're able to analyze where's that wind coming from? Where's it going? When's it switching? And then you can make a game plan surrounding those external factors. And a lot of times those external factors are things that you can only find from being there. There's only so much that you can guess or pontificate on regarding wind and animal behavior on Google Earth and onX, So that ended up being I'm going to be honest, that was that was a little bit the ringer, right? Being so good, being so knowledgeable of that country. Because then, man, once you have that nailed down, you could then kind of replay that game plan all around the mountain. Or in my case, I ended up elk hunting in 3 different mountain ranges this year, just kind of trying to figure out where the honey holes were. And then, so like you're saying, that early part, I was bouncing around all over the place. And then towards the end of the season, it would get narrower and narrower and narrower. And I'd know where those populations of elk were located and able to kind of move in quickly. And I could, here's a really sad story. So as I was driving around at night in a different mountain range than the one I kind of had scouted, my home range, I was in one range over, driving around looking for bugles at night. So this is the tactic that I think folks should really implement if they're just not in elk. I drive around at night. I'm bugling off these steep banks and these steep ridges down into the deep, dark canyons and trying to get something to respond back. We're talking midnight, 1 a.m. Like, you're going to take a nap the next day after these kinds of excursions. My truck breaks down and I'm 60 miles from town. So long story short, it blows up and I'm truckless. And I have my girlfriend at the time drop me off back in the home range the next weekend. And I had her drop me off in this area where I knew there was a bunch of elk, and I just had to get them talking. It's real thick. You can't really glass. They'd actually moved down out of that alpine country, and which was really interesting to see, because at some level that when you're scouting up high, you got to understand what's going to happen as the season progresses. I got in there and I called this bull in, and he was just on a string. And I remembered, like, okay, get the wind so that you are parallel to where the bull's coming from. The wind is moving up and down. The bull's coming across the hill left to right. This is perfect. He is just fired up. He is screaming his face off, and I don't have to do anything. So I get drawn back. I see the antlers coming through the trees. I'm like, all right, well, like, this is day 16 or 17 of the season. It's going to happen here. I pulled her back. He was close enough. I was like, there's no way I need the range of this one. Like, he's tight. I let her rip tater chip and, started counting my blessings. I was like, oh, there he is. There's the elk. He was a good herd bull. I walk up to my arrow and it is snapped off at the insert of the broadhead. And I was like, oh no. So a 23-yard shot straight to the shoulder blade was just one of many, many, like, disappointments on the season. It was insult to injury because I was up there without my own vehicle as well. Like, I was like, okay, I just got to keep hunting. Like, I can fix this. I can deal with life after September. And man, that was just like demoralizing. So, I mean, that was one of, when I was telling you, 5 misses on the season. So, I mean, it was a struggle, man. It's just one of those things where you look at that and you're like, there's no way that you look at that and aren't a little bit disappointed. You're just like, but you're almost in so much disbelief that you're like, what am I going to do? Like, you just got to keep getting after it because you have no really other options. I mean, you say, man, I'm going to go back in time and make that one go true. You can't. So you just keep, I always joke to Cody because it's overplayed, but I'm just keep hammering, man.
All right, Cam Haynes.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, no, I definitely, it's funny. You look back at your season and, you think about those opportunities where you screwed up or you did something wrong or, all of the shoulda, coulda, woulda opportunities.
Yeah.
And it's tough sometimes when you are, whether it's your 5th miss or it's, the 10th time you've come around a corner and just spooked a little bachelor herd that you just never expected to be there. Or, who knows, or that 10th time that you get pinned down by an elk and the wind's wrong and he's staring right at you and you can't move and you just can't get in on him. Like, these things happen and it's tough. And it's really hard sometimes not to look at that, like, especially when, you've been unsuccessful for multiple weeks. Yeah. You look at that and you're like, well, that was my last chance ever. Like, it's hard not to get that mindset.
Like, oh, there it goes.
I'm never going to see another elk. I'm screwed, might as well just go home and give up. Like, it is tough not to do that.
Yeah. I remember once that happened, I remember texting Cody being like, after that happened, I looked at that and I was like, I had the experience at that point that that most guys look for. You call in a bull elk screaming, you get a shot at 23 yards. And like, the only thing I was missing was the dead elk, right? At that point. And I call him and I'm like, I feel like it'd be real easy for me to throw in the towel on this one for a whole host of excuses. And he said, yeah, but you're not going to, because I won't let you live it down. I was like, all right, you're right. So, and I think a large part of that mindset, like is super effective to implement in your everyday life as well. So that next weekend, I borrowed a buddy's 4Runner, like a 98 4Runner. It was his spare rig for getting around the mountains, and he had schoolwork to do. So, by the goodness of his heart, he was like, yeah, dude, just go mob around. Don't go down, X, Y, or Z road, because those, he's like, I do want my 4Runner back, and I know you're lucky with vehicles. So I was like, okay, fine. Like, I totally understand. I was just appreciative of being able to get to the mountains. And on Sunday, in Wyoming, the season ended on Monday, the 30th of September for archery. On Sunday, it was my last day because I got to go work on Monday. And I kind of looked at this zone. It's actually the border of private, what I was talking to you about, that I kind of scouted. And I knew that the elk weren't in the alpine anymore because they bumped down. And I'm like, well, there can't be fewer elk down in the bottom, So I just kind of looked at this set of drainages. There's half dozen or so that were all lined up. And I was like, okay, I've gone down each of these fingers one time at least. Why don't I just go to the border of private and run them all at once? So I dove down in there. It was actually a similar kind of situation that I encountered a bull in. And I was like, this is going to be it right here. I rip off a bugle, nothing. And then I go to the next drainage, rip off a bugle, nothing. And I go to the next drainage. And then I realize, like, oh, it kind of opens up a little bit. I'm like, oh, 40 mile an hour wind gust down here. Yeah, that's why nothing's bugling. Like, they can't hear me. So, like, in typical fashion, and then this is like, I want to make sure I give Cody enough credit for like really coaching me through this, because I think it had been easy for me to be like, yeah, it's just like too many things as obstacles, right? Like, it's not going to happen. But I says, all right, Cody, like, what do you do when you have 40 mile an hour winds and your main tactic in this thick country is bugling at bulls? He says, don't be in thick country. I was like, all right. So he's like, go glass. And I go up to this high point where I can see out to some BLM property that I knew that there had been some elk on, but I was like, this is kind of my Hail Mary. And sure enough, an hour before daylight, 2 bulls are out there in the clearing. I'm like, oh, no way. So I pull out Onyx and I'm doing my little map distance, 2.5 miles, an hour left. I was like, oh boy. So there's actually an old skid road. None of this is accessible via like vehicles, but it's old logging road and kind of comes up from the private where they used to log coming from the bottom. And I was like, okay, I get on that road. I'm going to start jogging and maybe I can get there. So as I'm jogging, just like on a treadmill, just moving as fast as I can, something clicks as I come around a corner and I go like, there's no wind here. Why is there no wind here? And I like kind of like looking around. Like, it's just like this little pocket that's back along the creek bed and like kind of goes up in a drainage. And I was like, well, I'm not going to run the last mile and a half if I don't have to. So I'll bugle into this drainage, but probably going to have to keep running. So I let a rip tater chip to the old Phelps locator call, and I got a response right below me. He's like 500 yards below me. I'm like, oh, thank goodness I don't have to run the last half mile or mile and a half. So I dive down in there and I'm doing, so you run through your checklist, right? You have like, I'm going to challenge bugle, see if he comes in. I go do that. I get no response. okay, fine. I'm going to sound like a herd of elk because, they'll be interested in the cows and like what's going on with this commotion. And then, maybe they'll come in even though there's a bull tending to them. So I do that. No dice. I'm running out of time. Then I go, earlier in the season, I was in that high alpine and I cow called for a bit, and this calf started like in the timber, and I called to it back, and it literally ran up and like wanted in my backpack. It was just like wanted to go home with me. And I was like, maybe I can make that like hyperactive like calf sound and it'll be interested, like what else do I have to lose? And I do that as I'm like walking pretty creepily through this like aspen patch. And sure enough, there's some raghorns standing there looking at me. And I'm like, well, they're probably gone. Like they've seen me now.
Yeah.
And they kind of turn to leave, and I cow call right at them again. And they stop and they like kind of take a couple steps forward. I'm like, no way. They're like 70, 80 yards at the time. And so then they turn to leave again because they don't see a calf there. And they go up on top of this rise, and I sprint to the top of the rise. Right on the other side, there's a bull standing there looking at me. He stood long enough for me to get a range, and I let it rip, man. The rest is history.
Hell yeah!
So
then the work had to start.
Well, there's more to it, I guess. So I, you see guys do this on TV all the time or on YouTube or whatever, where you shoot something and then you're like, you know what, it looked a little far back or whatever. Like it looked good, but I'm going to let it sit overnight. I'd never done that. Keep in mind the next day is supposed to be work day. Probably not going to have anybody to help me pack out, but I was like, you know what, I think I've made it this far. I think my boss will forgive me. So I hike out of there. At that point, I'd gone 11 and a half miles on the day, and it was dark. And it was 7.5 miles back to the truck.
Oh,
so that was a big one. You could joke. I went full send on that one. Because it was bottom of the ninth, and it was just like, this has got to happen, or it's not going to. So then I grabbed the kid who loaned me the 4Runner, skipped school the next day. This is really a sales pitch for having good friends. So he comes down there, and sure enough, we find where the bed's bedded up, or the bull bedded up that night. Find a couple drops of blood, and long story short, track that bull down. So it was the most intense 24 hours of elk hunting I've ever had. Including the 4 or 5 misses I'd had up to that point. It's just like some days it comes together and there's no rhyme or reason. But I think that's also what you get when you don't go home,
Yeah. See, man, I don't know if I've got that. Like, that's the one thing I just don't know. It is waiting on a bull, man. Like, I just don't know if I could do it. Like, or like after I shot something, like, oh man, it's like, just the thought, like all that would be going through my head is I'm never going to pick it up again. I'm never going to find the blood again. If it's dead, the coyotes are going to get to it, or a bear's going to get to it. I'm never going to find it or see it. Some other hunter's going to find it and like chop off the head and take me, like, that's literally, I would be so paranoid. I don't think I would even, I don't know what I'd do.
It took a lot of faith. Just like in that as a process, and that's one of the things I think I realized about the whole season in general is like, you got to put a lot of faith in the process. That's, I actually started doing Mountain Tough workouts. I don't know if you're familiar with those.
Yeah. Actually, I think did you post something today? Something from your Instagram profile just popped up about that.
Yeah. I did like a testimonial thing for those guys just because, I like to give credit where credit's due, and I lost 20 pounds since February by kind of getting after it with their workouts. I don't think an 18.5-mile day would have been in the cards had it not been for that level of physical fitness. It's just, it was a game changer for me from a foundational standpoint. It makes a huge difference when it comes to mental preparedness and like, are you ready to like go through this sufferfest of like, I have 7.5 miles in the dark by myself to walk back. Granted, I'm not in Grizz country and I'm not in wolf country. It still is not fun,
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, and that was all, man, there's a ton of factors that went into it, but trusting in that process and trusting in the fact that bull would be laying there was not easy for sure.
Yeah. I think one of the things about, I mean, hunting in general, but especially elk hunting is, like you said, it is trusting the process. But so much of that realization comes from those times when you don't trust the process and you don't fill a tag because of that.
Yep.
And something along the lines of like, I am not sure I'd be able to sit and let that bull sit overnight and make sure it's make sure I don't bump it until I finally get a shot on a bull and I go to, I just immediately start chasing after it and I bump it twice and never find it again. It's like until maybe I do that. And then the second I do that, suddenly my my faith in the process gets a little bit greater and I'm not so much of a dumbass, but
man, I think it goes for everything though. Like, and I guess that's what I was trying to say as far as Mountain Tough goes. If you're looking at your physical fitness or your health or nutrition or whatever, you have to kind of trust that like, okay, I'm not going to be able to see this change even in a couple days, couple weeks, couple months. Like it's going to just one day you're going to realize, there it is. I think about that when I think about whitetail hunters or people who are sitting in tree stands or sitting in blinds. Like, man, I would have a dang hard time not shooting something if I was just sitting in one place the whole time. You have nothing in your control at that point except for the like variables, your wind or your setup or whatever has happened previously, right? You have to trust like, yeah, that buck's going to come in today, or that buck's going to come in tomorrow, or that buck's going to come in before the end of the season. And I think about that with work too. It's just enjoying the ride is 95 to 99% of the battle.
Man, I just got back from a Missouri whitetail hunt with some buddies of mine, and we're sitting in tree stands and I'm still learning a lot about that. Like there's a lot of stuff you learn to where like, I had 2 tags. I had an any deer tag and then I had a doe tag. And cool. I had some does come in and both times I could have plugged probably 2 does. But like, I didn't know, I just didn't know all the different stuff. Like I didn't know that like I could probably have shot one of those does and just let it lay there and a buck would have absolutely come in. Yeah. And kept hunting. Like, I just didn't know that stuff. I didn't know the process to trust in, but it was tough because I'm like sitting there and I'm like passing on these does mostly just because I also thought I had an extra day of hunting and I did not because I got days confused. That was unfortunate. I probably would have plugged them if I'd realized that. Anyway, I digress. But, that was tough because the whole time I'm sitting there, your mind starts going, what if? And, it's that mix of like, I'm definitely a firm believer in don't pass on the first day what you'd gladly take on the last. But then,
sure,
also, there's certain things like you paid money for a tag and you want to do every effort to fill it with, whatever you'll be happiest with. And, I kind of went out on this hunt with like, I wanted to bring home some meat. Like I was in meat crisis, but a buddy had already tagged a bull and I was going to take that meat home because he was just going to donate it. So I figured, I'm like, okay, worst case situation, I don't tag anything. I still get to take the meat home. So I wasn't as concerned, but yeah, that patience is a big struggle of mine. Like I struggle with just not doing stuff on a hunt. Like I don't like waiting. I don't like glassing. I shouldn't say I don't like glassing. I'm just really bad at it because I feel like I need to be doing something and it doesn't feel like I'm doing anything at all. Like it kills me.
Yeah.
But
I don't know. So as a Wyoming resident, I went into the wilderness with Lampers. Ryan Lampers at Stealthy Hunter. He is an incredible glasser. Like he just is an incredible, like he's got good eyes and insane amounts of patience. We spent an entire day trying to see, like we heard this bull bugle from a small timber patch and we spent an entire day waiting for that bull to step out. Like that's all we did for that day. And, there's something about once you're at that level of experience, he just knows whether or not we kill something today doesn't affect whether you kill something tomorrow. And I heard actually on your on your recap podcast of your hunt in Montana that you had taken some days to like just glass or just figure out the country and understand that recon, that intel that you're gathering is going to pay off like huge dividends in the end. And folks oftentimes will walk out in the woods thinking that day is the day it's going to happen. I'm going to get lucky today. And when you start looking at variables that you can take out of there and start looking at things that you can really control, I think from a larger perspective, it makes folks way more effective. That's really, and you look at guys like your Brian Barneys, your Cody Riches and your Ryan Lampers, man, there's nothing that they're doing on a daily basis that is forcing the luck hand. They're always doing something to set up the next chess move that is going to set up a win.
It's, I mean, talk about some killers right there.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's like the example that those guys set with their patience and everything. It amazes me. Like I was thinking about that during my season this year. I was thinking about just like some random little videos Cody, shares during his seasons on his Instagram and stuff. And I just sit and I think about kind of what a lot of those videos represent in the whole of their hunt. And like when they're talking about these things and you kind of realize you're like, man, he's passing on that. He's sitting there, he's talking about, he's waiting for this thing. And I'm just like, I am not even close to that level of, I'm I can't wait till I'm there. I can't wait until like, it almost sounds kind of odd. Like the word doesn't feel right, but it's, for lack of a better term, it's almost like, you have to get over that little desperation to fill a tag.
Right. And it makes filling a tag way easier.
Oh yeah. And I feel like, everybody talks about like that kind of stages of being a hunter, where you go through and you're like, I just want to kill anything at all. I'll take whatever I can get as soon as I possibly can kill it. And, you kind of progress to being more selective and all this, and you just move through kind of this whole process. And I don't like using the word desperation because it's not quite accurate, but it's like there's definitely like this need, this pulsing urgent need to fill a tag, just to feel like you've accomplished something. And after you've done that so many times, you realize that's not necessarily the huge accomplishment, I
think it's really important, just like you're saying, like that desperation, like fill a tag. I didn't, I filled an antelope tag in 2018. And that was great. That was fine and dandy, but I ate an Idaho elk tag and I ate a Nebraska mule deer tag and I ate a Wyoming whitetail doe tag. And I walked away from that season going like, man, I feel like I suck, but oftentimes what I think we do is put pressure, just like you're talking about with your Missouri hunt. You put pressure on yourself because you've spent time, money, and resources to make a hunt happen, even though the outcome is it's still like in a lot of ways secondary. I was thinking about this, or I was talking about it with a friend of mine, Jess, the other day, and we were talking about how we want to go, or, travel different places, right? If I'm going to go to Turkey, I'm not going to go to Turkey because I want to necessarily kill something in Turkey, though I don't know if they have hunting there. Though if I go to Mongolia, I really do want to do some argali hunting, something like that. I think about hunting in general as the Turkey trip. Turkey as in the country with Istanbul. Not turkey hunting. I think of hunting in that perspective as it's an experience that you're buying. It's an experience that you're going to go have. It is way cheaper to fill the freezer with meat from it's easier to fill the freezer from meat from your local butcher than it is to go out and try to acquire this, via hunting. So once you kind of have that mindset of like, okay, it's not necessarily all about the meat, even though, gosh, it's really good. You can settle in and have those experiences that we were kind of talking about. And I bet you had a great time watching those does in Missouri, man. Like sounds really cool to me.
I mean, and it was awesome just chilling in the tree stand, and they walked up kind of right behind me, and they were literally like, they knew something was up there, but they weren't spooked by me. Cause I mean, I was stock still, but they came up and they were sniffing at the ladder, the tree. It was a metal ladder stand. Yeah. So they're like sniffing at the ladder, and they'll like sniff at the ladder a little bit, and they'll look right up at me, and they'll just sit and stare at me for a while. And I'm looking back down at them, just watching them. And it's a cool thing. Like anytime it doesn't matter how many big bucks I see, how many elk I see, I still, I'm driving through town and I still just about slam on my brakes and pull to the side of the road every time I see a little group of blacktail or mule deer does.
Yep.
Teeny little yearlings just on the side of the road. I pulled into the driveway the other day and they almost ran over a doe in our own driveway, and
that's awesome.
Just pulled over and I just sat and watched it for like 20 minutes before getting out of the car. And, like it doesn't matter how much you see. It's just so cool to experience and see wildlife and all of that. But still doesn't mean I don't want a really big ass elk.
Right. Well, it comes back to just like what goal setting means. And gosh, I played some sports in high school. I always set kind of financial goals or whatever the career goals. The thing about goals though, is like if you hit all of them, like you're probably not setting good enough goals. If you're knocking them off the list left and right, you probably should consider doing something a little harder. And that is kind of a way, in my perspective, that's a great way to grow. And when you're stepping into the elk woods, for instance, every time that you were talking about this earlier, like every time you've gone out there, you've learned something a little different. You've picked up more information about animal behavior. You picked up more knowledge about where they'll be next time or what not to do on that bow hike. That I think is where the true gem lies. When you're starting to hit your goals, honestly, like move the goalpost.
I feel like it's having, I guess, levels of goals is important too, because you want those goals that you're like, that you'll hit, that you'll be happy with, and you can look at that. You can say, yeah, I had a successful trip. But then, like you said, you want those goals too that are bigger than that immediate trip, the ones that are going to push you, that you're going to strive for. And knowing the difference,
knowing that you have to have some way of knowing you're progressing. Because like if you're not progressing at all, gosh, it can be a grind, man. But at the end of the day, whether it's a career goal or financial aspirations, it would be, if my goal was to make $10 an hour, I probably should move that
goal. So if you had to kind of distill it down to maybe three or a few things that you would say were the most critical things that took you from 5 years of frustration and unfilled tags to this first year of success, filling your tag with your bow? What would you say are maybe 3 of the critical things? We already talked about hunting the same area.
Yep. So what that I think really translates to is time in woods and time in the same woods. So the fact that I put so much time in between June and September, really for a lot of folks could just mean, man, figure out an area, go to some place that you can learn it year after year, take some summer trips to go out there, go boating on the nearby lake or whatever, just like make that your home area and put that time in the woods. So that's number 1, time in woods. The second thing was persistence. There are a lot of factors that, like I was saying earlier, I told Cody, man, it'd be really easy to quit right now. In order to reach that goal, it wouldn't have happened if I said, dang it, I've got a day left of season, I'm just going to go for a mile hike today. Instead, I was like, it's bottom of the 9th. You got to send it or you're going to regret it. A couple years ago, this is tangential, but I think it's important. A couple years ago, a big snowstorm hit in 2017 during the middle of elk season. The place I was in, the elk were going off. They were fired up and just very inexperienced still. I still am inexperienced, but at that point, I didn't really know what kind of a play to make when they were bugling, how to really call them in. And I went up into the high country and found some elk I could glass. Glassed this bull up with a herd, and I moved in within probably a quarter of a mile, and then he started moving his herd away. And you've got about 10, 12 inches of snow on the ground. It's 3 or 4 miles from the truck, 2,000 vertical feet up, and you start looking at that truck down at the bottom of the drainage, going like, that's a long ways back, and I don't have any food, and this elk, I've always got tomorrow. I turned around at like 2 p.m. It doesn't get dark till like 7. And I turned around at like 2 p.m. because I was just like, I'm a little tired. My legs are sore. This elk is he's faster than me. I'm not going to get him. After that trip, I clearly didn't shoot a bull that year. After that trip, I swore to myself, like, I'm never going to walk away from another elk hunt thinking I left something on the table. And that's kind of what I did this year. Cody helped that a lot, and having a good support system is important, because especially when you've got yourself, you're holding yourself accountable and you've got people holding you accountable, it makes being persistent much, much easier. So that was number 2.
I'll tell you, the one thing that I struggled with telling myself, like in that same kind of vein, I'd look at something, and sometimes I had to do a lot of self-talk, because I'd look at that, I'd be like, I'm probably just going to go screw it up anyway. So why am I going to kill myself to go over there?
Yep.
Like it was so bad. I'm like, well, that situation's too complex for me to be successful. So why am I going to chase that? And that was a lot of, I definitely had that same situation where I'm just like, I'm tired, I'm done, I'm checked out, I'm heading back to the car. But yeah. I struggled with that.
Oh, and it just like you're saying, like you have to have some sort of mantra to fall back on, or like some sort of motivating factor that you've given yourself. Because I know a lot of folks out there who, my dad is one of these guys. He's out hunted a long time, but will tell you, like, luck wasn't on my side this year. And here's the third point for you. Luck, in the limited experience I have, luck seems to be the intersection of hard work and opportunity. I had 6 opportunities on elk this year, and obviously the 6th one was the one that panned out. the other things, and you listen to Cody Rich's podcast about his elk that he shot this year. He was literally asleep in a meadow, and this elk came bugling into his face and woke him up from his beautiful sunny slumber. And he wakes up and shoots a 320 bull, almost 330 bull. And again, you can look at that and go, man, that dude was lucky. Well, he was in the right place. He was in the right time. And when it came down to like the rubber meeting the road, he was the guy who could crawl over to his bow, slip his release on without being detected, and put an arrow in that bull without crapping the bed. So yeah, that's number 3, man. Hard work and opportunity equal luck.
I will also, and you listen to my recap podcast and I mentioned that too. I will also say though, the inverse is you can do everything right, 100% right.
Yep.
But it still does require a little bit of luck.
There's some opportunity that you got to have fall in your lap. Yep.
I mean, it's just like you can do all the scouting. Everything can be perfect, but one day you can just have the bad enough luck that a pack of coyotes happens to run through this day and scares the whole herd, like that you were all 100% prepared to, you never know. And I mean, it's definitely luck has to present itself, but you have to be prepared to take advantage of it. And you have to put in that hard work and be the right person to take advantage of that luck. But
ever since we've talked about this 201 series with Cody, I've started trying to call it opportunity. You've got to like create opportunity. Oh yeah. It's just like, oh man, those coyotes ran through the herd, or son of a bitch, it's windy today. You just got to keep creating opportunities, Yep. No, it's good stuff. And really it's funny because there's a ton of podcasts out there about what elk behavior looks like, what mule deer behavior looks like, what it's like to shoot your bow, what it's like to call, all of these different like skills and tactics. But I think at the end of the day, man, you can read a lot of textbooks, but applying the math is where the rubber meets the road.
All right. So, say somebody comes up to you, runs into you at an event or something and says, hey man, I saw how you were successful this year. That's so freaking cool. I've always wanted to elk hunt, or I've always just wanted to get into hunting, into the backcountry, whatever it is. They're like, but I don't know, man. I don't know people that do it. I don't have any background in it. There's a lot to learn. It's kind of intimidating. I don't know if this is something I can do.
Right.
What kind of encouragement or words of encouragement would you give that person in a situation like that?
How do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. They need to, like, that person, if they come up to me and says, I want to get into this kind of hunting, I'm first going to say, okay, what pieces go into that? Where are you at? Where do you know? If you've never been camping before and you want to go backcountry hunting, man, you probably ought to go on some hiking trips. You should definitely start with one bite at a time. I think a lot of folks, like you're saying, will come into hunting or fishing or backcountry skiing or whatever the endeavor is, and they go, man, I want to do that thing. And they point at the top and they don't look at how many pieces make up that whole pie. A lot of times I think goes back to that goal setting thing. What are these steps? What are the goals that you're going to have to set to get there? And then just take them one at a time. I don't think, for instance, it would have been a guaranteed success this year if I didn't have any hunting experience and Cody gave me the same knowledge. Yeah, I would not have been anywhere close to where I was this year. So something needs to be given to the fact that there's a process and you got to follow it, which is oftentimes not necessarily folks oftentimes look for the silver bullet. It's one bite at a time, man.
No doubt. All right. So if people wanted to find you online, where can they follow the shenanigans?
Oh, well, we do have some shenanigans to follow. I'll be honest. Ever since I moved up to Montana, Cody, I've been doing a lot of Instagram with Cody. So you can follow me if you'd like at Jaden Bales. You can follow the podcast at Rich Outdoors. which is Cody. And then you can also check out Backcountry Fuel if you'd like at Backcountry Fuel. And those are kind of all the places you can find us. I'm pretty much on all of those, running DMs on the back end of those Instagram profiles. So you'll find me somewhere. So
awesome, man. Well, thanks for hopping on.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciate it. And to keep up the awesome work with this podcast. I know you're inspiring a lot of folks.
Thanks, man. All right, y'all, that'll do it for episode 127 of The Wild Initiative. Make sure y'all check out the show notes page at thewildinitiative.com/127. Check out links to everything we talked about in today's episode. All right, y'all, that will do it for today. Looking forward to next week. But until next time, I hope this episode inspired you to get involved, get outdoors, and plan your initiative for the wild.
Thank you for listening to The Wild Initiative. Please take a moment to leave a rating and review on iTunes or Stitcher, and head on over to thewildinitiative.com to get show notes, check out the blog, gear discounts, other podcasts from the Wild Initiative family, and more.
You know, it's a cool thing. Like anytime it doesn't, puberty hit for a second there. It doesn't